Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and we recently just finished our coverage of the first year of the Clone Wars. It seems like everything just seemed to magically balance itself out throughout the entire war. The Separatists never seemed to get completely ahead and destroy the Republic's ability to fight back. Meanwhile, the Republic is constantly having their plans disrupted by Separatist agents. Now, we as Star Wars fans know that Palpatine was playing both sides and had an intricate network of shadow brokers, corporate, and political interests. This was a network that he and his late master Darth Plagueis had been setting up for decades. The idea was always to use chaos in the Outer Rim and the Separatist Alliance to fuel the Republic's own militarization, which would also lead to giving the executive branch far more power. Sidious and Plagueis were far more cunning than the Sith Lords of old. They had a political savvy and networking skills that was unrivaled in the galaxy. They understood the flaws of the Sith's past. Back then, everything had always been about struggle and friction, the Sith clashing with the democratic and so-called good forces of the galaxy. That friction had always worn down the Sith, and even when the Jedi were defeated numerous times, the Sith would find themselves fighting amongst each other. But this time, in order to prevent Sith from fighting each other, Palpatine created a conflict that would wear down the Jedi only while keeping himself hidden and isolated in the shadows where he could feed off all of their confusion and growing hate. And Palpatine did a great job at hiding his influence. It's incredibly hard for us as viewers to see where his influence comes to play. Every time the Separatists managed to ambush a Republic convoy, I've wondered, did Palpatine leak the information, or was this just genuine Separatist intelligence? And that's what I kind of want to talk about. Who in the Republic and in the Separatist Alliance knew that Darth Sidious was actually Palpatine? First, let's start with the obvious. Count Dooku, or Darth Tyrannus, had left the Jedi Order after becoming disillusioned with the Jedi Council and their decision-making capabilities. Dooku first withdrew himself from active duty after he was forced to lead a squad of Jedi into an especially bloody skirmish with Jango Fett's true Mandalorians on the world of Galadron. And then, when his former apprentice Qui-Gon Jinn died, he finally resigned from the Order, becoming one of the Lost 20. The Lost 20 were the 20 Jedi Masters that had left the Order in the last few millennia. Now, prior to even leaving the Jedi Order, Count Dooku had already come into contact with Darth Plagueis. But this is while Plagueis was disguised as Higo Damask, a wealthy member of the IGBC and leader of the powerful lobbying group Damask Holdings. It was during these early meetings that the Jedi would express his frustrations about the Jedi Order and also the Republic. It was because of this that Darth Plagueis decided to keep tabs on the promising young Jedi. Darth Sidious, as Senator Palpatine, also became a close confidant of Dooku during his last years in the Jedi Order. Together, they would develop a bond similar to the one Palpatine would have with Anakin. Palpatine at the time had a spotless record and was well liked by most people in the Senate. He had an uncanny ability to solve problems and approach things with rationale and without emotion. He never gave away his political ideals and seemed fluid and ever able to adapt to the situation at hand. For someone like Dooku, who was fed up with the bureaucratic mess that was the Republic, an individual like Palpatine was a godsend. With a friend like Palpatine, the Jedi could actually get things done. It was around the time that Qui-Gon Jinn died that Palpatine would also kill his master Darth Plagueis. Count Dooku became the obvious choice for an apprentice. Initially, Dooku learned of Darth Sidious through Viceroy Newt Gunroy when he was on trial for the blockade of Naboo. But before Palpatine would ask Count Dooku to become his new apprentice, he already had another individual he was set on. Palpatine had long already made up his mind about who he actually wanted to be his apprentice, and that was Anakin Skywalker. The young Padawan was much more emotional, less intelligent, and easier to manipulate than the Count. And on top of that, Anakin had an unprecedented amount of midichlorians in his bloodstream. His power was unrivaled. But at the time, Anakin was still too young and not ready for the grooming process, so Count Dooku would have to do for now. Dooku's first mission as Darth Tyrannus was the creation of the clone army on Kamino. Although this plan was the brainchild of Lord Sidious, Darth Tyrannus would do the majority of the footwork. He would be the one who contacted the Kaminoans, who would also be the one who was responsible for getting rid of Sifo Dyas after he placed the order, and also he was the one who selected the clone template, Jango Fett. Dooku had seen Jango Fett kill several Jedi with his bare hands during the Battle of Galadron, and thought that that skill in particular would become useful for the Grand Army of the Republic. Now, during this time, Darth Sidious would let Count Dooku in on the plan because Count Dooku would serve as the head of state for the Separatist Alliance. But as far as everyone else in the organization, we're not really sure who else knew. First, there's Darth Maul, who had direct contact and training from Darth Sidious. After all, Sidious was the one who took Maul as a child from the Dathomiri witches. If Darth Maul doesn't know about Darth Sidious's plans, it's only because Plagueis and Sidious saw Darth Maul as more of an assassin rather than a full Sith Lord. During the Naboo crisis, it was also very important for the Sith to remain in the shadows, so it would make more sense to keep their true identities from Maul in case he was captured. However, as the war went on, I'm sure Darth Maul began having suspicions of who Darth Sidious actually was. When Palpatine becomes Supreme Chancellor and has his face pasted all over the place, Maul probably put the pieces together. After all, Maul had seen Sidious's face many times, but by then, Darth Sidious had already discarded him. But what about Count Dooku's agents, like General Grievous? Surely the cyborg would be let in on the secret, especially during the Battle of Coruscant where Grievous kidnaps Palpatine. But again, I think this is unlikely. In the same way Sidious never told Maul anything, Count Dooku never really trusted Grievous. If we look at Legends, the reason why Grievous becomes a cyborg is because the Sith sabotaged his ship. They saw him as a capable warrior and wanted to enslave him. In a way, it's similar to what Palpatine did to Anakin. Now, Dooku at the time had blamed the crash on the Republic, and this was a good idea because the Republic were at war with Grievous's people. So, from the very beginning, Count Dooku and Grievous's relationship was built on one gigantic lie. So I wouldn't be all that surprised if Grievous doesn't know that Dooku is a Sith, let alone had a Sith master who was controlling everything behind the scenes. So during the Battle of Coruscant, it's very possible that Count Dooku just told Grievous not to harm Palpatine or make him into a martyr. But it should be noted that in one of the newer Disney comics, Darth Maul, son of Dathomir, General Grievous goes on a mission with Lord Sidious, so the cyborg has seen Sidious's face and may have been let in on the situation later on in the war. Now, Asajj Ventress is another Sith agent, and she presents a different scenario. While Grievous was completely numb to the Force, Asajj was a powerful Force wielder. She actually was a former Jedi Padawan and had 2 masters killed in front of her before Count Dooku got a hold of her and twisted her into a weapon. Like Maul, Dooku considered Asajj Ventress as more of a tool or a weapon rather than just an apprentice. It also made sense for Dooku to keep Asajj Ventress in the dark about Darth Sidious's true identity. But nonetheless, Ventress does meet Darth Sidious at least on one occasion, and Darth Sidious sees Asajj Ventress as a threat to his own power. Not only was she a dangerous dueler, she also would go on to help train Savage Opress. Palpatine, a student of ancient Sith history and the Rule of Two, understands how crowded things could get when there were rival Siths taking apprentices. When Ventress is eventually betrayed and let go by Count Dooku, she wanders around rather aimlessly for a while and then becomes a bounty hunter. She would then go on to team up with Jedi Quinlan Vos to go hunt down her hated enemy, Count Dooku. Through their entire trial to find out where Count Dooku has gone, Ventress seems to be clueless about Palpatine's real identity. Other than his various assassins and agents, Darth Sidious also served as the point man for making contact with many of the leaders of the Separatist Council. As early as the blockade of Naboo, Darth Sidious had contacts with Trade Federation leaders who knew him as a Dark Lord and not the Senator of Naboo. These exchanges were almost never in person and carried out by using a hologram. Darth Sidious always wore a hood and concealed his face and voice, so it's very possible that the Trade Federation leaders had no idea who he actually was. And that makes sense because the Neimoidians are complete cowards, and should they be caught for their illegal actions against the Outer Rim systems, there was no way to guarantee that they wouldn't talk. It also wasn't necessary for the Trade Federation to know who he was, just the label of being a Sith Lord was terrifying enough. As far as they knew, Darth Sidious had a network of spies and agents infiltrating the Republic. So generally speaking, Darth Sidious did occasionally reveal himself to his agents and followers in the Separatist Alliance. But as far as they knew, he was a wealthy Sith Lord who was pulling the strings behind the scenes. When he claimed stuff like this:
"Begin landing our troops.
My lord, is that legal?"
I will make it legal.
That just kind of makes Newt Gunray assume that Palpatine has connections within the Senate, which was much easier to believe than the fact that Darth Sidious was actually a part of the Senate. So it was really only Count Dooku who knew Palpatine's true identity. Because it was only really necessary for Count Dooku to know about the wider plan, because Count Dooku was the head of state for the Separatist Alliance. As much oversight as Palpatine had sometimes, it was hard for him to contact the Separatists. Palpatine was under heavy scrutiny and watched at all times, so it made sense to allow someone on the Separatist side to see the entire picture, or at least enough to make decisions without Palpatine having to advise. Now lastly, it's very possible that Palpatine's own inner circle knew who he actually was. Masamida, who was the vice chairman under Chancellor Valorum, would go on to serve Palpatine during his chancellorship and eventually helped run the day-to-day operations of the Empire. He was a terrific administrator, a sycophant, and very easy to control. By the time of the Empire, Masamida definitely was in on the secret, but we're not sure at what point Masamida was aware of the Chancellor's true identity. Amida did have his own network of informants, so it is even possible he was able to find out by himself. Sly Moore, Palpatine's main assistant and aide, is also rumored to have been intimately involved with Palpatine, and might also know of the Dark Lord's identity. She was also a Force-sensitive individual, which is probably why Palpatine kept her around. Now, later on in Legends and canon, when Palpatine became Emperor, a cult of the Sith was built into the Empire. These were high-ranking members of the Imperial government that worshipped the Sith along with Palpatine. You had individuals like Imperial Advisor Yup Tashu, a non-Force-sensitive historian who was fascinated with the Sith and worshipped their power. In a way, these kind of guys reminded me a lot of a vampire thrall, and there were a lot more of them than you would expect in the Galactic Empire. But it's not really clear if any of these individuals were active in Palpatine's government during the Republic era. It was probably too dangerous to have Sith worshippers running around the capital, especially with the hundreds, if not thousands, that were stationed on Coruscant. So there you have it, guys. That is our analysis of who we think knew that Darth Sidious and Palpatine were the same individual. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button. My name is Alan, reminding you that life is a movie, and you are the protagonist.